everybody, Happy New Year, and I would like to ask you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you share this with your family and friends across the world.
I, therefore, the prisoner in the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in all. It is difficult to attempt to preach a sermon without acknowledging the terrible violence that happened at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. When we think about all of that hatred that was on display by people who really thought they were, I just have to believe they thought they were doing the right thing. But the level of hatred that it takes to try and make your point through violence, and the fact that trying to make the point based on lies is a picture, for lack of a better word, of what can happen when we abandon, turn our backs on the God that so many of us claim that we serve. I imagine that many of what the media spent a long time calling protesters, while they were committing acts of violence, I imagine that many of them would tell you that they were Christians. That's my imagination. I haven't talked to any of them. I don't know that to be certain, but I just think that there are a lot of them that were there and destroying property, taking things, hurting people. I think a lot of them would say that they were Christian, and they would probably even say that a lot of their acts were all because they were trying to serve God. I do hope that as we think about who God is, think about his loving kindness and how much he expressed himself all throughout his word, the patience that he has, the love that he shows towards us. I would hope that we would come to a place where we understand that God is not about taking over things by force, not like this, not like what we saw on television. Yes, there are some places in the Bible where there was battles and wars and people were killed and all of that. There's some passages that talk about take it by force. But you have to weigh those passages against the entire Bible. You can't just take the one and say, okay, I'm gonna take it by force, and then just start running around slaying people all over the place. For one of the things that we find in the passage today where Paul had written a letter to the Ephesians, we've got to understand where Paul came from and why he would write these kinds of words that talk about unity and love patience, and kindness. This language that he uses when he's interacting or sending a message to the church in Ephesus, we've got to remember where Paul came from. He wasn't always Paul. His name was Saul. And if we read the word carefully, what we find is that when he was Saul, he was somebody who was high up in the hierarchy of perhaps the Sanhedrin or one of those bodies that was running the religion back in his day. And as this movement towards Jesus began to take hold and he saw it happening, the first thing that Saul decided to do was try to stop this madness, this Jesus movement that was happening. That was his first inclination. And we're talking about somebody who was well-versed and well-taught in the law of Moses, knew it better than you or I. He knew who God was. He served the Lord. That's what he did. And as a matter of fact, if we're reading the Bible correctly, what we'll find is that Saul was, I don't know if he threw any stones at Stephen, but certainly participated and condoned the stoning of Stephen the martyr. And it was while he was on his way to Damascus to continue to persecute and to try to stamp out this Jesus movement that he was met by Christ. And the Lord began to do a marvelous work in his life to help him understand that he didn't really need to fight the battle and kill people down here, all in the name of the Lord. He seemed to find out and understand that God was all about love. He wanted the people that he created, both Jew and Gentile. He wanted people to not only love him. The Lord doesn't want us just to love him, but he wants us to love one another out of the love that God has, he has for us. And so here we are in this passage where Paul is talking about this unity that is birthed and born out of a love for God. This unity that we have that causes us to love one another over hating one another. This certain kind of unity that we find not because we agree all the time, but that we love one another enough to allow different opinions to exist. And not a unity that says that we have different truths, but there is only one truth. According to the Word of God, there's only one truth. There's not many different truths. We live in a society now where it seems as if people seem to think and operate, and I'm talking about folk in the church, seem to operate as if we can have different truths about the Lord. The truth of the matter is there's only one truth. We all have different gifts. We have different purposes. We have different destinations. God takes us down different pathways. All of those things can be different, but God is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. He is not some God that has a truth over in the land of Asia and then a truth in America. His truth is the same all over the world, for he is truth. There is but one God. And so if we will serve the one God and we will serve him in the mindset or in the knowledge that he loves us despite all of the things that we do, have done, continue to do, to say that we don't want him to be a part of our life. So many of us want to be Lord of our own life. We won't even allow him to be Lord in our life. And we'll do that over and over again. But he continues to love us. He continues to offer himself for us, to us. He paid the ultimate price by having his son die on the cross, just so you and I could have a right to eternal life. He came down on this earth, walked these dusty roads to an ungrateful people that he created that would kill him on the cross. He did all of that just for us, to express his love to us. And here we are, we can't get along with one another. People that we see every day. We can't take the time to figure out how to love one another. It's easy to love people that love you. The Bible lets us know that. Jesus says, if you love, he asked this question, if you love people that love you, then what more are you doing than sinners? The challenge comes in when we are tasked with loving those who seem to be completely unlovable. This is the type of unity I'm talking about, this unity in God that allows us to not look at other people and see other, not to look at folks that are different from us and say, oh, that's the other folks over there. But to look at people who perhaps are different from us and say, you know, that's a part of who I am in my community. So we've got to understand that when we're in God, we're one community. If I'm a child of God and you are a child of God, when I hurt, God hurts. And when I hurt, you should hurt too. When I tell you that I'm in pain, you should believe me and not question whether or not my pain is valid. When I tell you I have a concern, you should take the time to listen to my concern and not dismiss my concern because somehow we don't look the same. When I complain about policies that seem to hold me down, you should hear me out instead of thinking that I'm just complaining or assuming that I'm somehow lazy. All too often, we dismiss one another because we won't even listen. And Paul is calling on the church at Ephesus to be united, to understand that we've got one God. There's one Spirit, there's one baptism, that all of this lines up into one place. And if we have the same source, then we ought to be able to get along. We may not have the same likes, we may not have the same destination, we may be headed in a different spot, but we ought to be able to get along with one another. We ought to be able to traverse this journey that we're on together, even if it means like Abraham and his nephew Lot had to do. They got to split up because they got too much stuff and they can't exist on the same land. Every now and then we ought to be able to split up. But if you'll notice, they may have split, but when Lot got in trouble, Abraham went to save him. So my brothers and sisters, will you join me throughout this year and love God enough to love your neighbor? I'm not talking about skin color here and all of that. Just whoever. Your neighbor is who you run into. I'm not talking about the person next door. the people that you run into, the folks that you have interactions with, that's your neighbor. Can we find a spot of unity? Not unity in all the various things we want to accomplish on our own, but unity in the Lord. Because He, and I believe He alone, can fix all these problems we're facing in our country. Work on loving God right, and we can work on loving one another. May God bless you, may He keep you, is our prayer.
Thank you for joining us again today, and Happy New Year. Hope you all had a great time. But before we leave, I will ask you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this with family and friends across the world. And if you are so led to donate to this channel, the link is in the description below.